My name is Elena Vasquez. I am 34 years old. Last Saturday, my mother-in-law stood at the head of her dining room table, held up a manila folder, and announced to her entire family that she had proof I had been lying since the day I married her. Son, she had spent 4 months building that moment. What she had not spent a single second considering was that I had spent 3 weeks preparing for it. Before I take you back to the beginning, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Now let me take you back 6 years to the first night I walked into Margaret Hargrove's house. I was 28. Daniel and I had been dating for 5 months. He picked me up at 7 o'clock, and I remember he had pressed his shirt, which he almost never did, and I understood that this was not a casual dinner. Margaret opened the door before we knocked. She had been watching from the window. She was 61 years old, silver hair set in careful waves, wearing a silk blouse on a Tuesday evening, and she assessed me the way customs agents assess luggage: thorough, practiced, already suspicious. The first hour was pleasant enough. Roasted chicken, a question about my family in Tucson, a question about where I had gone to nursing school. All reasonable. But Margaret steered every answer back to the same destination. And your parents? Are they still in Arizona? Both of them. Together, each question a thread she was pulling, testing for loose ends. In the car afterward, Daniel said, "She loved you?" I said, "I hope so." He laughed. I did not. What I noticed that night, and filed away the way nurses file away a patient's off-color complaint that does not fit the diagnosis yet, was that Margaret Hargrove needed to understand the origin of everything, every person, every object. The wine had to have a provenance. The furniture had to have a story. I was no different. She wanted my paperwork. Daniel and I married the following spring. Outdoor ceremony in Geneva, Illinois. 40 guests, white lights in the trees. My mother flew in from Tucson. Margaret wore champagne, which my best friend called audacious. I called it Margaret. The first 2 years were quiet. We bought a house in Naperville. 40 minutes from Daniel's parents, Margaret visited on Wednesdays. She had a key for what she called emergencies, which apparently included rearranging my kitchen cabinets. She once reorganized my pantry and left a handwritten index card on the shelf. Canned goods by expiration date, she had written, "Just easier." I thanked her. Daniel said that was just how she showed love. I wrote the date in my planner, professional habit, and said nothing. Oh, daughter, Mara was born 2 years into the marriage. 8 pounds, dark eyes, dark hair, the image of Daniel at birth according to every photo his mother had ever framed. Margaret held her in the hospital and cried real tears. I thought, maybe this is the bridge. Maybe a grandchild is the thing that finally makes me enough. Mara's hair began to lighten around 18 months, not dramatically, gradually, the way seasons arrive. Dark brown became warm chestnut. Chestnut became amber by her 2nd birthday. She had deep golden hair and pale green eyes. Nobody in Daniel's family had that coloring. Everybody in mine did. My grandmother, my aunt, my mother in old photographs. Genetics, to me, were not a mystery dot to Margaret. They were a developing story. She said it first at Christmas. Mara had just huddled into the living room in a red velvet dress, and Margaret's sister, Joanne, said, "Oh, she is just precious." Margaret tilted her head. She does not favor the Hargroves much, does she? I wonder where she gets that coloring. She said it lightly, the way you mention a crack in a ceiling. Not alarming, just something worth watching. I started keeping a log, hospital habit, behavioral patterns, repeated phrases, context, 12 comments in 8 months. All variations on the same theme. Where does she get that from? I do not see any Hargroves in her. She is unique looking. Daniel's younger brother, Connor, amplified things from his own corner. He posted a photo of Mara on social media with the caption, "Little mystery girl." 40 people liked it. I shooed Daniel. He shrugged. Connor is just being funny. I closed my laptop and said nothing. but something in my chest had made its first precise measurement. The moment I understood the scope of what Margaret was doing arrived on a Wednesday in October. I had come by her house to drop off Mara's forgotten jacket after a visit. Margaret was at her book club. Robert, her husband, was in the garage. I let myself in through the side door the way I always did. On the kitchen table, partially tucked under a placemat, was a printed email. I did not intend to read it, but I saw my name and I stopped. The email was from a genealogy and DNA service, a confirmation of a submitted sample. The name on the account was Margaret Hargrove. The sample label read Mara Hargrove, age 2. I stood in that kitchen for 90 seconds. I counted them. Then I took a photograph of the email with my phone, tucked it back exactly as I had found it, picked up Mara's jacket, and left out in my car. I sat with both hands on the steering wheel and pressed until my fingers went white. Then I called a family attorney. Her name was Priya Mehta. She practiced out of a small firm in downtown Naperville. I told her everything, the comments, the social media post, the kitchen table email. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, under Illinois law, a grandparent has no authority to submit genetic testing on a minor child without written parental consent. What she did may constitute a violation of your daughter's privacy rights and is potentially actionable. Don't confront her yet, Priya said. Don't tell Daniel. If you tell Daniel, he will call his mother. She will apologize. The family will close ranks. Nothing will change. Let her play the hand she has already dealt. I paid the consultation fee and walked out into the October air. Then I drove to pick up Mara from daycare. She ran to me at the door, arms up, golden curls flying. I held her and thought, no one is going to take anything from us. That night, after Mara was asleep, I opened my laptop. I researched the DNA platform Margaret had used, consumer service. Lacks consent verification. I created my own account and spent 2 hours reading how familial matching algorithms worked. When you submit a child's DNA, the system cross-references every profile in the database for genetic relatives. Then I logged into Margaret's account. She had used Mara's birthday as the password. Under potential relatives, there was a name I did not recognize. Thomas B., age 52, Dallas, Texas. Relationship estimate, half-sibling to Daniel Hargrove or equivalent. I read the line 3 times. A half-sibling to Daniel meant one thing. Thomas shared a biological parent with Daniel, either with Robert, Daniel's father, or with Margaret. I took a screenshot. I emailed it to Priya. Then I opened a new browser tab and began searching. Thomas Beaumont, born 1973, Dallas, Texas. Adopted at birth through a private agency in Chicago, Illinois. His DNA profile noted, searching for biological family, open to contact. Margaret would have been 22 in 1973. Robert and Margaret. Married in 1976. I sat at my kitchen table in the quiet of a sleeping house and did the arithmetic. Margaret had a child 3 years before she married Robert. She placed a child for adoption. She had never told anyone, except. When I looked at the shared matches on the DNA report more carefully, one profile appeared on both Thomas's results and Mara's. Joanne P. possible aunt, Joanne, Margaret's sister. The same Joanne who always found a reason to leave the room when Robert began asking Margaret questions. Who never quite met my eyes when Margaret made her comments about Mara's coloring, who had known for 50 years. If this story is hitting close to home, subscribe right now. Stay with me. 3 days before the dinner, Daniel mentioned his mother was planning a special Saturday meal. She wants the whole family there, he said. Joanne, Connor, Robert's brother Frank. She said she has something important to share. I said, sounds good, and I began to prepare. The dinner was set for 6 o'clock. We arrived at 5:45. Frank's truck was in the driveway, Connor's car, Joanne's silver sedan, full house. Margaret hugged Daniel at the door. Long, deliberate, she nodded at me, a single efficient motion. Come in, dinner is almost ready. The roasted chicken was excellent. Robert told a story about their first car. Frank laughed at the right moments. Joanne refilled her wine glass twice. Connor kept checking his phone. I ate steadily and watched the currents beneath the surface. 40 minutes in, Margaret set down her fork. Before dessert, I have something I want to share with this family. The table contracted. Robert looked at her. Connor sat up straighter. Joanne's hand went to her collar. Margaret walked to the credenza by the window and returned with a manila folder. She set it on the table and pushed it toward Daniel with 2 fingers, the gesture of someone who had rehearsed. I had questions, Margaret said, questions any grandmother would have. About where certain things come from. She looked at me for exactly 1 second. Open it, Daniel. Daniel looked at her, then at the folder, then at me. His face was careful, the way a careful man's face becomes when he feels the ground change beneath him. He opened the folder. He read the first page in silence. 10 seconds, 15. Margaret clasped her hands on the table. Daniel looked up. He is mine, he said. His voice was quiet and even. Probability of paternity, 99.9997%. He held up the page. Mara is my daughter. Margaret blinked. That is not possible. The coloring, the hair, the eyes. She does not look like any Hargrove. Daniel set the page down. He looked at his mother and spoke a sentence he had never spoken to her in 34 years of being her son. Mom, you had no right. Margaret's composure fractured. Not all at once. Piece by piece. The way Ace fractures at the edges first. The results are accurate, I said. My voice was the same voice I use at the hospital when a patient's family needs information they are not ready to receive. Clear, level, without decoration. I know because the lab contacted me for parental consent 2 weeks ago. Consent you never obtained. Joanne closed her eyes. Robert leaned forward. You tested our granddaughter. Without asking. I was protecting this family, Margaret said. She does not look like us. There had to be an explanation. I let the silence sit for 3 seconds. Then I said, but that is not the most interesting part of those results. I looked at Daniel. Page 3. Daniel turned the pages. He read, aloud the way you read something your mind is not yet prepared to process. Potential familial match. Thomas B. age 52, Dallas, Texas. Relationship estimate. Half-sibling to Daniel Hargrove. He looked up. Half-sibling. He turned to me. That would be through my side. He turned to his parents, Mom, Dad. Who is Thomas? Robert frowned. I have no idea. Margaret's hand found the edge of the table. Joanne set her fork down. It struck the plate. One sharp sound in the silence. Trish, she said, 2 words. And the room understood everything that came next. Margaret began to cry. Not the practice tears she used when Connor missed Christmas. Something older than that. The tears of a weight carried so long the muscles forget what it felt like not to bear it. It was before your father, she said. I was 22. I was not ready. My parents made the decision. I have carried it every day since. Robert did not raise his voice. He was not that kind of man. He simply said, 50 years, Margaret. We have been married 46, and Joanne knew. The question was not angry. It was something more final than anger. The sound of a man realizing the map he had been using was drawn by someone who chose what to leave off it. Joanne, Robert said, did you know? It was not a question. Joanne pressed her lips together. She nodded. You both did, Robert said. He pushed back his chair, stood, picked up his jacket from the back. He looked at Daniel. I am going to drive for a while. He looked at me. I am sorry, Elena. For all of it. Then he walked out the front door and closed it behind him. The room sat in the wake of that closing door. Margaret looked at me. Danielle, this is because of you. You did this on purpose. I looked at her steadily. You submitted the test, Margaret. You planned the dinner. You pushed the folder across the table. I said the last sentence slowly. Those are your choices, not mine. Daniel stood. He looked at his mother for a long moment. She was smaller now. Not physically. Something structural had given way beneath the surface. Mom, He said it without anger, without heat. You built a case against my wife for 2 years. You involved my whole family. You stole my daughter's DNA, and the secret the test found, it was yours. Margaret opened her mouth, closed it. We need to go, Daniel said. He looked at me. Get Mara. I went to the guest room where Mara had been napping. She was awake, sitting up, hugging her stuffed rabbit, her golden curls loose around her face. She looked at me with her father's dark eyes. Mama, is dinner done? Yes, baby. Let's go home. We drove in silence for 20 minutes. Mara fell asleep. The highway was dark and quiet, and the passing streetlights laid amber bars across the dashboard. In slow rhythm, Daniel spoke first. How long did you know? About the test, 2 weeks. About Thomas, 10 days. He was quiet. Then, why didn't you tell me? Because you would have called her. She would have cried and asked you to keep it in the family, and you would have tried to protect everyone the way you always do. Because you love them, but nothing would have changed. He gripped the wheel, released it, gripped again. You are saying the pattern was too old. I am saying I needed you to see it clearly. Without me between you and it. Another mile passed. She dyed her hair, he said, almost to himself. All those years saying Mara did not look like a Hargrove. His voice changed. Her hair was the same. She hid it. I watched him process it. The way a good man processes something that reorganizes his entire past without letting the reorganization make him cruel. He reached across the console and found my hand. He held it until we turned into our driveway. He did not let go until the engine was off. He sat in the dark car and looked at me. Thank you, he said, for not making this smaller than it was. I squeezed his hand. That is not what this is. That is not what we are. The following week, Daniel reached out to Thomas through the DNA platform. Thomas responded within hours. He had been searching for 14 years. He was a civil engineer. In Dallas, he had a wife and twin boys. He had never stopped wondering where he came from. They video called on a Thursday night. I took Mara to the living room with her rabbit 20 minutes in. I heard Daniel cry. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere a person has been protecting for years without knowing it. I stood in the doorway. On the screen, Thomas had the same hands as Daniel. The same way of holding his jaw when he was listening hard. Thomas said, I just wanted to know where I came from. I never meant to hurt anyone. Daniel said, you did not hurt anyone. The truth does not hurt people. Thomas, only the hiding does. Margaret came to our door 2 weeks later. She stood on the step in a gray coat, no jewelry, her silver hair unpinned. She looked like a woman who had finally stopped performing. I need to explain, she said. Daniel answered from behind me. You do not need to explain, Mom. We understand more than you think. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had cataloged my flaws for 6 years, who had taken my daughter's DNA without permission, who had built a stage for my humiliation and lit the lights herself. You are welcome to be Mara's grandmother, I said. She loves you. We will not take that from her, but you will not be alone with her, and the terms of this relationship will be ours, not yours. Margaret nodded. Her chin trembled. She did not argue. For the first time in 6 years, Margaret Hargrove did not argue. She walked back to her car, and I closed the door. Robert moved back home 6 weeks later. He set conditions, full honesty, no locked histories. Margaret agreed. She began seeing a therapist, which Robert had made clear was not optional. Thomas and his family visited in July. His twin boys played in our yard with Mara. Daniel and Thomas sat on the porch. 2 men with the same hands, finding each other. In the middle of their lives, I stood at the kitchen window with my coffee and watched them. Some truths take 30 years to arrive. Some weapons built to destroy you become the things that set you free. The manila folder sits in my desk drawer. I kept it, not as a trophy, as a reminder that the people who try hardest to uncover your story are almost always running from their own. If this reminded you to trust yourself when everyone else doubts you, share it with someone who needs it today. Subscribe, leave a comment. Tell me what part stayed with you. I will see you in the next one.